discussing FSU, Clemson, and the ACC's future. Welcome back to the Mountain. I am JY, and this past week, Steve and I were able to speak to Trevor with Saturday's Warrior regarding the ACC lawsuits and the future of the ACC, FSU, and Clemson. We decided to clip the end of that segment. We have it for you now. We hope you enjoy it.
Now we're hearing reports that potentially the Big Ten and the SEC may not be interested in these schools. Some of that, I mean, again, you have to think about where are these sources coming from and what is their agenda behind releasing this information. So I think there is some posturing, but I can't believe that Florida State and Clemson would go through all this effort, all of these expenses without having a pretty good idea of what their outcome is going to be and where they could potentially end up. And so really, let's say in 5 years or so, maybe that hopefully that's enough time for all of these legal proceedings and everything to play out. Where do you see Florida State and Clemson in terms of conference and their athletics?
Well, Steve, you have pretty strong opinions about Florida State on this. Yeah. And we've done a few episodes. We call it College Football 2030, where we envision what college football is going to be like in 2030. But we'll focus on FSU. And Steve is pretty sure he knows where FSU is going to be at, probably in less than 5 years. But I'll let you tell the viewers what you think.
Yeah, over the course of my job in real life, when we're not having fun on YouTube, I work in the state of Pennsylvania, kind of where state government and higher education intersect. And due to my day job, I've made some connections at Penn State, both within the university administration and within the athletic department. And now, if you talk to someone at Penn State versus you talk to someone in Nebraska, they're going to have some different inputs or whatever. That's just how it goes. But I feel very confident that there is a spot in the Big Ten for Florida State. I know that there's already been back channel communications going between some of the Big Ten schools and Florida State, similar to what was going on when they were talking with USC before that all went down. So my expectation is Florida State will be in the Big Ten. Now, the big issue, and we've talked about this a lot on our channel, is timing, okay? The Big Ten would first of all, they are not going to invite Florida State or make any movement until Florida State has finished its legal battle and could come with their rights intact, okay? So they're adamant they're not going to get involved in this. So that's part of it with the timing. And the other thing is, the Big Ten's current media agreement that they just signed, it goes through, I believe, 2030. And that's when there's a deal. So I think the Big Ten decision makers would love to see this go closer to 2030 because then they don't have to try and come up with new money or do half shares like they did with Oregon and Washington, which is not ideal. So I kind of split the difference before. And my prediction is probably, 9 months ago when Florida State fans, our friends on War Chant, they were saying basically by this fall, Florida State would be playing in the Big Ten. And if not by this fall, it'd be next fall. That was always just crazy hopium and copium to me. So I'm going to say 26 or 27 at the earliest that Florida State will be playing in the Big Ten. And I feel pretty strongly about that. Now, again, the matter is timing. We'll see how long these court cases go. And if it ends up going to the Supreme Court and going through all that, we could be closer to 2030. Now, so I see Florida State as the 19th member of the Big Ten. Now, as far as the 20th, I don't really have a lot of information on that. No one really has mentioned any other names of schools to me specifically, but I made the prediction on our show in our 2030 episode. I think Clemson will ultimately be that 20th member of the Big Ten. That's just a prediction. That's a guess. They're not AAU members, but they are working on increasing their research status. They are a public land grant university with a large alumni base in a southeastern state. And so there's a lot of demographic things that I think make sense. Now, the Big Ten could go in a total different direction. There's rumors that they're looking at Texas A&M. They're always chasing Notre Dame or whatever. But in my prediction, I had Florida State for sure, and likely Clemson by the end of the decade joining the Big Ten.
And since he's got all the knowledge, I just say, yep, I agree with that. The only thing I would add to that is, and you mentioned this a little bit, was with the Big 12 and some of the more recent, we'll just call it what it was, and the McMurphy article. That's what everybody seems to fly off the handle about. And just from an objective outsider, as we said, I have I'm not an FSU fan. I'm not a Clemson fan. I'm not an ACC fan. I'm not a Big 12 fan. So I'm just taking this all in, trying to get different, viewpoints and things like that. I don't really understand all of this talk right now about the Big 12, and that's not a knock on the Big 12, but it gets back to kind of how you asked the question. Why would you do all of this? Why would you spend all of this money that could be years worth of legal bills for all we know? If you don't know something, you don't have a landing spot. And yes, to be clear, there's been no, official invitation, sign on the dotted line. That is not what I'm saying. But I would look back to the pack and say those schools, aka USC and their buddy UCLA, they knew where they were going well before they said, "Hey guys, we're leaving." Like, that doesn't just happen in 24 hours. Right. So it only leads me to believe that definitely FSU, with as aggressive as they have been, the nuclear option that they have chosen, I don't see why anyone would have done that without knowing where
having a very good idea
of where you're going to be headed. And I said recently, we're both on X, and I said recently, if they did that and they don't know where they're going, if you're an alumni or a booster or a fan, you should be so incredibly upset about that. Now, that doesn't mean they don't maybe have a year of independent because of the timing, like Steve's saying. There maybe need to be some sort of interim thing happening. Totally understand that. But if it's like, hey, we're withdrawing and we don't know what we're going to do, it makes zero sense whatsoever. It sounds good, all the speculation on X and everywhere. It sounds good, but I don't put a lot of stock into it. They have a home in one of the power conferences. We've been saying that for quite a while. We firmly would believe that. With FSU, we don't have as much info on Clemson. But again, I would take the same lead and say, why would they be doing this? Kind of similar to what FSU is doing. They haven't taken the nuclear option yet, like FSU did, but they're following in the footsteps of FSU for sure.
And I do want to add, if I may, something that I think your Big 12 fans could be interested in. So first of all, both JY and I think the most likely scenario is the ACC survives. They've shown they will do whatever, adding SMU, adding the West Coast teams, whatever. We believe they will likely. I think JY is like 100%. I'm probably 70% that the ACC will survive. There is a scenario where we talked about though before, where the grant of rights gets punctured, where ESPN does not move forward with their media agreement. That could put the ACC in jeopardy. And if that's the case, the linchpin is the University of North Carolina, which means the North Carolina Board of Governors. You have to watch there to see what happens. If the ACC can keep North Carolina and North Carolina State, they will stay, a conference and stay intact probably for as long as we're all doing our YouTube channels. But if let's say the ACC hemorrhages a couple teams to the Big Ten, and then maybe the SEC comes calling, maybe they have an opportunity for a couple of those, for a University of Virginia, for a North Carolina, maybe a North Carolina State, who knows? Then you could start to see that cascading effect where the ACC is really in trouble for their existence. And in that scenario, I could see Pittsburgh, Miami. Miami would obviously love to get an invite to the SEC. I don't see that happening, but I could see those two schools as really good fits for going to the Big 12. And there's probably some other schools too, but those are two that would be at the top of my mind if there was a start of a collapse of the ACC, where and both of those schools would fit great, I think, in the Big 12 for sure, with their footprint and the style of football they play and everything.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was another question I had, was what other schools might we see get out if that door is cracked open and they have the chance. I know a lot of theories are thrown out there. UNC is one of them. Last year, at one point, there was the Magnificent Seven, so it seemed like there was other interest among other schools. Do you guys think that there is a potential chance for a jailbreak, and how big do the Big Ten and SEC want to get? Because I think that'll impact obviously a lot of this, because that'll determine how many schools would have an opportunity to jump to one of those two conferences.
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't think let me start with your second question about the Big Ten and the SEC, because that'll lead into why I think the ACC is not in danger of collapsing. And that's because, and Steve, you can agree or disagree. I don't think either of these conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, are looking really to expand a lot. Like, there's a lot of speculation about who they're going to take. But, we have said in our 2030 episode, we don't see either one going above 20 schools. Quite frankly, you've seen the SEC, like, they're pretty daggone happy with where they're at. That doesn't mean they may not add 2 more, maybe 4 more to get to that 20. Certainly Notre Dame's a game changer if anybody can get them. We have said through 2030, we think for the next 5-6 years, they're going to stay independent. They have everything they want. There's no need for them to go anywhere. So if the 2 conferences we'll max them out at 20. And so there's 6 spots, right? 6 spots from any conference, any other conference. That doesn't lead to an ACC collapse. It just, there's other schools, can they pull some up from the AAC or the Sun Belt or whatever the case may be to fill in the gap to maintain that composition clause that I talked about. There's just way too many options for them to maintain a 15-member conference that they need, or whatever that composition is. I'm under the opinion that there would have to be such a cataclysmic. What's that word?
Cataclysmic.
I can't
catastrophic.
Catastrophic. All of that crap. That's so out there. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's very minute possibility. So that's why I'm under the assumption. I wouldn't give it 100% because I don't think I give anything 100%. I'm a strong 95% probably that the ACC, yes, there will be some changes to membership. I don't see them going anywhere, because where are they going to go? If the SEC and Big Ten are only going to go to 20, and to me that's a big if, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah. So we did in our 2030 episode, I made my prediction of Florida State and Clemson going to the Big Ten, and I had a group of 4 schools going to the SEC. Really this was a guess more than anything. I had North Carolina, North Carolina State, UVA, and Virginia Tech going to the SEC, just because there's been rumblings for a few years that the SEC wanted to move into those 2 states. And I think in both of those states, they would have to take a package deal. I think that they would have to take both UNC and NC State, and I think they'd have to take Virginia and Virginia Tech due to the local politics. Now, I made that prediction before the Board of Governors has really, in North Carolina, has come out strongly multiple times now, saying that they believe it's in the best interest in the public universities in the state of North Carolina to stay together in one conference. So again, on Florida State, nobody really knows, beyond Florida State and probably Clemson, what's going to happen. But the key linchpin, you always want to look at certain things. Where can you get your cues? And to me, it's the state of North Carolina, the Board of Governors there, and UNC. If like I said, I know I'm repeating myself, but if the ACC can keep North Carolina, UNC and NC State together, I think that the ACC survives in near perpetuity, because that's what they want. That's their motivation. It's kind of like how Notre Dame is so motivated to stay independent. They're going to stay independent as long as they can. I think the politicians in the state of North Carolina, they are super motivated to keep those North Carolina schools together.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. In one way or another, even if, as you mentioned, there becomes a fire sale of sorts, I think the ACC still has a lot of options to stay together. And they obviously have an example from the other side of the country of what not to do and not how not to approach it. So regardless of, who manages to stay and leave.
And what you heard there was the ending of our 1-hour talk with Trevor at Saturday's Warrior. If you're interested in seeing that whole episode, check out the link in the description to this, or you can go to his channel, Saturday's Warrior BYU. We spent about an hour talking about the ACC's lawsuits, giving a high-level summary of the last 8 months, and of course, giving our predictions and thoughts of where the ACC, FSU, and Clemson will end up. With that, hey, we thank you guys for watching. Give this one a like, subscribe if you like our content, and we'll see you next time on The Big Mountain.